Morning tango. Morning tango. Morning tango.
What's going on YouTube? Today we're breaking down my hardest loop yet that I made live on stream a couple days ago. I'm going to break it down. The whole stream is still up if you want to go watch the process as I made it live. But I'm just going to go through, give my tips and tricks on how I made this melody. So here you can see I've got the full project in front of us. I have the exported stems as well as the original MIDIs and the sounds that I used throughout this whole loop. What I'm going to be doing is going through each of these sounds and all the effects that I added to them and really show you how to make your perfect melodies. So starting off, I picked out this piano from a one-shot kit that I have and I just put down these 3 simple notes. And over here on bars 7 and 8 I switched up the chord progression and I got this. And my next step was to sort of fill out the frequencies a little bit and I added down this low piano to go with the high melody. Sort of playing the bass notes of the chords that I would be playing. And you can see bar 7 and 8 it goes down again. And together they sound like this. You can already hear that it's starting to sound a little bit dark, but it sounds a bit empty. What I did next is I went back into the one-shot kit and I found this string. As you can tell, it sounds horrible without any effects. And that's just playing the F note throughout. One thing that I really wanted to try and experiment with was sliding notes, because one-shots allow you to do that. And as you can see, I sort of have this, what I would imagine to be on a mellotron kind of thing. It's like a synth. And I just add a sliding note, then an octave, and it sounds a little bit like this. And trust me, with the new effects that I add, this sounds even crazier. One more thing that I added was this little pluck that I sort of heard from Apex Legends, the game, if any of you have ever played it. It sounds very reminiscent of the original theme title that they used, and it just goes crazy. I'm going to play the metronome along with it so you sort of get the rhythm. Sounds super crazy just by itself. And the last thing, this is going to sound terrible without any of the effects, is a one-shot bell. You might be able to tell that this is a sliding sort of sound, and what I did to do that is I went into the sound, clicked the wrench, and I turned up portamento and the slide all the way up, so then the notes glide together. Just like that. So altogether, this is what the original melody sounds like. Super rough. Now in my mixer channel you might be a little bit confused as I only have what, 5 or 6 sounds in here, and yet I have up to 19 tracks. What I like to do is I do the original melody, add my first round of effects, bounce it out, and then I do my second round of effects. So in my first round of effects on the main piano that you hear throughout the little 3-step chords, I added a round delay or reverb, sorry, a fruity delay, and then a micro shift to make it kind of wider in your headphones. And that now sounds like this. And if I compare that to what I originally played, there's a lot more movement and a lot more space in the actual melody. Now moving on to those bells that you listened to last, these are the second thing that I sort of processed, is very simple again, is a reverb, a delay, a pan man to get some more space, and then an EQ, sort of just taking out some of the highs, taking out the bit of the harsh sounds. And you can tell it's tucked super way back in the headphones. It's almost not there. Now for the string sounds, super simple. This is what I do to all of my strings, is a little bit of reverb and then an EQ to sort of take out some of the highs. Not all of them, just enough that they sort of don't take away from the bells and later on effects. You get the idea. The low piano throughout is kept the exact same, as it's already quite a good quality sound, and I didn't really need to change it much to fit into what I wanted, so I just left that one completely blank. Now, as for that sort of sliding sort of synth sound, I added a reverb and a pan man. All of these sounds are super clean off of the start, and it's only really when I get to my second round of effects I really start messing around with, halftime and all that sort of stuff. So with the reverb, it now sounds like this. You can tell that it sounds almost exactly the same, just a little bit more space in the sides. And the last thing that I added effects to was the little pluck, and that is, yet again, just a reverb and a bit of a fresh air to give it a little bit more presence in the high and the mids. Now, one last thing I added is a melody bus. That is the first melody bus that I used. I'm pretty sure I used another one later on down the line somewhere. It's very simple. It did have halftime on it. I took the halftime off, and I got pan man on it just to make everything sort of move a little bit wider. Everything should now sound pretty spacious, and all the wider sounds are wide. All the ones that I wanted narrower should be narrow. And that's the original MIDI covered. Now, if you listen to the preview, what I currently have right now is completely different sounding to the finished result, and yet all of it is controlled by 4 plugins. On my master track from channel 12 up to 17 is all of these sounds, which are just the more condensed version of these ones, and channel 18 is simply another melody bus. On that bus it's labeled as halftime, as that is what I wanted it to be mainly used for, and other than halftime it's left completely barren almost, except for a couple of effects. So in number 1 I have halftime set to a half speed. All the sustain and the fade in, fade outs and the mixes are all left completely normal, completely default. And so even with just a halftime, we're now sounding like this. That is so much darker already. Now the next thing I added was a EQ to sort of take out some of the highs, but that isn't really in the sample, that's only for when you bring in drums, so that can be left on or off at this stage. I now have a vintage compressor from Ozone 10, as that's the kind of sound that I wanted to go for, and I sort of set the threshold to where the sound was sort of peaking. With a fairly high ratio, the attack and the release are fairly default, and this sort of means that any of the low sounds aren't being lost. And it's sort of limiting all the higher sounds to be sort of similar. The last thing that I added was a tape saturation or a vintage tape effect. It is almost default apart from I turn the harmonics up, the low emphasis up, the high emphasis is default, and the input drive is extremely high. And this sort of gives it a warm feeling in the mids, and it sort of builds out a little bit more character. The actual effect of it is almost unnoticeable with the compression, but if you really listen to it, there's quite a few harmonics in the middle that are sort of richer and warmer, that I think are almost crucial for samples like this. Now, one of the final things that I actually added was these vocal samples. It took me forever to find them, and they're both running into the channel bus 19, which is a vocal effect pretty much. It's got a vintage reverb, a delay, and then auto-tune just to make sure that everything stays in key. The reverb is actually set to fairly high, fairly wet, the decay's on 4 seconds, which is almost unheard of. The mix is half because I didn't want it to be too drained out and take up too much of the space. And the delay preset is sort of just as a bouncing vocal, so when the vocal ends it doesn't sound like it just stops completely, it still has a bit of feedback going through it. And my auto tune is set to, I like to have it as a 3 and 26 to 30 kind of area, so to set the key and you're almost done. But I've already bounced it out, so I already know what the vocals sound like. And so with all of the new effects, including the vocals, this is what we sound like. There are now 2 more things that I added that I think you should try and incorporate into all of your samples, especially if they're dark like these. And that is an ambient noise and then also a perk or a vinyl effect, I suppose it kind of is. And the ambient one is from a Kashmir pack that is just an ambient jungle storm, and it sounds a lot like this. There's a lot of rain, a little bit of a storm in the background. But it's super tucked away, super quiet. You can't really notice it, but it sort of fills in the gaps that there isn't any melody. And then this is the perk loop that plays along with it. It's super drained out, super reverbed. It's almost perfect for this kind of loop. And so finally, with everything that we have done so far, here's what the final loop sounds like. So after making this loop, it sort of made me realize that you don't need to rely on expensive plugins. Although I do use Ozone and sort of Auto-Tune, there are free versions of it that do just as good of a job. It's sort of knowing the melodies, and I didn't use any chords in this. So you don't have to approach it with a super theory sort of based mind. You sort of just need to know enough and sort of follow what you can hear in your head. And then if you're going for a dark sound, just slap a halftime on it. Just sort of experiment with halftime, because one of the settings is going to be perfect for you. But one final thing is this loop is going to be in my upcoming kit that I'm going to be trying to get out just before Christmas. So all of you that are getting new equipment or are just excited to make music over Christmas period, I got you with some hard loops, I got you with some dark loops. But once again, thank you for watching. The support has been insane recently on my actual videos, not my beats. My beats have been doing perfectly well, but a couple of my videos have been going crazy recently, so thank you all for that. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything you want me to cover. I've already done a mixing and a drum tutorial. This is sort of the final step for the basics, I suppose. But if you want me to go rich into the basics, or sort of go from opening FL for the first time up to making your first beat, then let me know and I'll do that for you. But once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.